Ready for a deep dive into some ancient wisdom.
Let's do it.
All right. Today we're taking a look at the Dhammapada, this collection of Buddhist verses.
Oh, it's a good one.
It is a good one. And you know what I find really interesting is we've got excerpts from 3 different sources.
Yeah.
And each one is kind of giving us a different lens on this text.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to try to weave them all together. What do we think?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. So for those who might be new to the Dhammapada, can you give us just a little bit of background? Like, what is this thing and why is it such a big deal?
Yeah. So the Dhammapada, it's a collection of verses, right? It's like Buddha's greatest hits, all compiled in one place.
Okay, like the essence of.
The essence of.
The teaching.
Exactly, distilled into these really potent verses. And it's super important, especially in Theravada Buddhism, which is a dominant form of Buddhism in South Asia and Southeast Asia.
Okay.
So that's where it's really, really big.
So it's been around for a long time. It's influenced a lot of people.
Right.
And we're going to dig into why that is. Now, one of the things that I found so fascinating, and I have to admit, kind of surprising, is that one of our sources, Thanissaro Bhikkhu, really dives into the structure of the Dhammapada as poetry. I don't know about you, but when I think ancient wisdom, poetry isn't usually the first thing that pops into my mind.
Yeah, you don't usually put those two together.
Right. So how does this poetry thing work? Like, why is it significant?
Right. It's fascinating, actually, because this poetic structure, it's not just there for entertainment. It's actually crucial to how the Dhammapada works its magic.
Yeah.
And Thanissaro Bhikkhu really gets into this. You know, we have to remember, these teachings were originally passed down orally.
Okay.
So think about it. What's easier to remember? A dry lecture or, like, a song?
Oh, definitely a song.
Right, with a catchy chorus, something that sticks with you. And that's kind of what the Dhammapada is doing with its poetry. It's making these teachings memorable.
So it's like mnemonic devices almost woven into the...
Absolute structure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
okay. So how does that work? Can you give me an example? Like, what does this savor look like in action? How does the poetry actually enhance the meaning?
Yeah. So one thing that Thanissaro Bhikkhu points out is this feature of the Pali language called lamps.
Lamps.
Lamps. And you can think of them kind of like threads. Okay. Connecting different phrases or sentences, sometimes even whole verses.
Wow.
And it creates this like beautiful tapestry of meaning.
A tapestry of meaning. I like that.
Right, where everything's connecting.
So it's not just about these individual verses standing alone.
Exactly.
It's about how they relate to each other.
It's about the interconnectedness. And, you know, that actually reflects a very core Buddhist teaching.
Which is?
Dependent origination. This idea that everything arises from conditions.
Wow.
It's all connected.
So the very structure of the Dhammapada is reflecting its deeper philosophical message.
Exactly. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. But this text isn't just some abstract philosophy, right? It's not just a bunch of pretty poetry.
No.
Our other sources, Acharya Buddharakkhita and Bhikkhu Bodhi, they really emphasize the Dhammapada as a practical guide for living a more fulfilling life.
Absolutely.
So it's for everybody.
Exactly. That's what makes it so relevant, even if you're not a Buddhist, right?
Right.
It's tackling these universal human experiences. We've got dealing with difficult emotions, how to navigate relationships, finding that inner peace. It's like a user manual for the human condition.
Ooh, I like that. A user manual.
Yeah.
Because I think we've all been there, right? Where we feel lost and confused and we're like, if only life came with a guidebook.
Right. What do I do?
Yeah. So does the Dhammapada, does it really offer concrete advice for these everyday struggles?
It really does. It gets really practical. So, for example, there's this one verse that always sticks with me.
Okay.
It talks about how being angry is like holding on to a hot coal.
Ooh.
You get burned more than the person you're actually angry at.
Yeah.
It's such a simple idea.
It is.
But it's so powerful when you really think about it.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, like, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Exactly. It's like, who are you really hurting in the end? And the Dhammapada is full of these little nuggets of wisdom, but it doesn't just leave them hanging there in isolation.
Right.
It connects them back to these core Buddhist principles, like the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path.
Now, those might sound kind of heavy.
They can.
Especially if you're new to this.
Yeah, for sure.
So can you give us like a crash course?
Yeah. Think of it this way. The Four Noble Truths, they're like a diagnosis, right? First, you acknowledge that suffering exists. It's part of life.
Okay.
Then you try to understand the root cause of that suffering. And then importantly, you recognize that there's a way to heal, to break free from suffering.
So it's not about wallowing in misery.
No, not at all.
It's about recognizing that, yeah, suffering is there, but it doesn't have to control us.
Exactly. And that's where the Eightfold Path comes in.
Okay.
It's like the prescription, the set of practices for that healing, for reaching liberation.
So we've got the diagnosis, and then the Dhammapada is kind of like, here's how you put that prescription into action.
Yeah, exactly. It brings it down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
It shows us how these principles actually play out in our daily lives.
And one concept that seems really central to that is karma.
Right.
Absolutely.
Karma's huge.
But it's also one of those things that I think can be easily misunderstood.
Oh, totally.
Like a lot of people, myself included, I think we tend to see it as fate or destiny, right?
Mm.
Like what goes around comes around in a very literal sense.
Yeah, it's easy to fall into that trap.
Right.
But the Dhammapada, it paints a much more nuanced picture.
Okay.
It emphasizes karma as intentional action and its consequences.
So it's not about like this cosmic scorecard keeping track of every little thing we do.
No, not at all. It's more about understanding that our actions, they have a ripple effect, both in this life and beyond.
So if we're constantly creating negative karma, it's not like we're going to get zapped by some cosmic lightning bolt,
Right.
but it's more like we're creating the conditions for more suffering in the future.
Exactly. The Dhammapada talks about a cosmic law, but it's not about punishment or reward. It's just cause and effect playing out over time.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this understanding of karma, it can be incredibly empowering
How so?
because it reminds us that we're not just victims of fate, you know?
Right.
We have the power to shape our destiny through our choices, through our actions.
It's like we're planting seeds with every thought, word, and action.
Exactly. What kind of seeds are you planting?
Right. And are those seeds going to grow into something that brings us joy or something that brings us suffering?
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so karma is like this ongoing process. It's not just about like one-off good deeds or bad deeds.
It's about the trajectory of our lives
Yeah.
and the direction we're heading in.
That makes sense. And it makes it feel less like, oh, I messed up. That's it. I'm doomed.
Right. It's never too late to change course.
Right, exactly. And speaking of changing course, the ultimate destination,
Yeah.
the North Star on this Buddhist path, is Nibbana, right?
Yes. Nibbana, the big one.
The big one. But what I found really fascinating, I think Bhikkhu Bodhi does a great job of explaining this, is that the Dhammapada doesn't just talk about Nibbana as this abstract concept. It actually describes different stages of awakening along the path.
It does. It's like a map with milestones.
Okay.
So you've got stream entry, which is kind of like dipping your toes into true understanding.
Okay.
Then once returner, suggesting you're getting the hang of this whole liberation thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then non-returner, you get the idea.
So it's a journey. It's not like you just suddenly wake up one morning and you're enlightened.
Exactly. It's a process, a gradual unfolding.
Okay, so it's less intimidating that way, I think.
Right. For sure. It makes it feel more attainable.
Right, because when I hear those terms, stream entry, once returner, it does sound a little intimidating.
I get it. But really, they're just pointing to different levels of understanding and liberation.
Okay. And if we think back to those 4 levels of teaching that we talked about earlier,
Right.
those apply to these stages of awakening too, don't they?
They do. It all ties together.
Like someone at the stream entry stage, they might still be motivated by the idea of a favorable rebirth.
Yeah, exactly. They're still kind of playing the game, but with more awareness.
Okay.
While someone further along, like a non-returner, they're totally focused on complete liberation from all realms of existence.
So they've kind of transcended that whole cycle.
Exactly. They're almost there.
Wow. That's fascinating. And this is why I think understanding those different levels is so crucial.
And it is.
It helps us make sense of what might seem like contradictions in the text, right?
Absolutely. Because what might resonate with someone at one stage of the path might not land the same way for someone at a different stage.
Right. So it's not about saying one perspective is right or wrong.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding the context
Exactly.
and meeting the teachings where we're at.
And that's the beauty of the Dhammapada. It really does offer something for everyone, no matter where they are on their journey.
This is so helpful, right?
Right.
Because I think when people hear about these different stages of awakening, it can sound a little intimidating.
Yeah, it can be like, oh, this is way too much for me. I'm not a monk. I can't relate to this.
Right. But the Dhammapada is really offering wisdom for every step of the journey,
Exactly. It meets you where you are.
wherever you are on your own path.
Exactly. And I think what I find so interesting about the Dhammapada is it balances those like really profound teachings on liberation
Right.
with this very practical advice
Mhm.
for how we navigate all the ups and downs of being alive.
Right. It's not this like lofty philosophy that's totally detached from reality.
No, no, no.
It feels very grounded, I think, and relatable.
It does. It acknowledges like the very real struggles.
Yeah.
We've got the pull of desires, getting our feelings hurt by criticism,
Yeah.
loss. Those are all very, very real.
Yeah, absolutely. Doesn't sugarcoat it, but I
Yeah.
think that's what makes it so
No.
refreshing. It feels honest, you know?
Yeah. It's honest about what it means to be human.
Yeah, and it's not afraid to be like, yeah, this is hard sometimes.
This is hard.
It's messy,
Hmm.
but it doesn't leave us there, right?
It doesn't.
It points us toward a way out of that suffering. And that's where I think the Dhammapada's emphasis on self-mastery
Yeah.
becomes so crucial, right?
It's huge.
We see this theme, I think, running throughout the whole text,
Yeah.
often symbolized by that image of the self-tamed individual.
Oh, yeah.
What does that really mean? When you encounter that in the Dhammapada, what does it mean to be self-tamed?
It's interesting, right? Because we think of taming as something you do to an animal, maybe.
Right.
But the Dhammapada is saying, like, no, you can tame your own mind.
Yeah.
Tame your wild mind. Because our minds, they can be pretty wild, right?
Oh, yeah. Full of those reactive emotions and those patterns that we get stuck in.
Yes. Clinging to desires, self-sabotaging. So it's about recognizing that power.
Okay, so it's about cultivating that inner peace, that inner wisdom, so we can actually respond to these challenges.
Yeah, with skill.
Yes.
Like you're training for something. Responding skillfully. It reminds me of that quote, I think it was Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher. He said, we can't control the things that happen to us, but we can control our response.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I know, right?
That's so true. And the Dhammapada is kind of like, here are the tools, here are the practices.
Exactly, to build that resilience.
Yeah, to train our minds.
And just like any training, it takes effort, right?
Right.
Showing up.
Yeah, consistency. But like you said, the rewards are immeasurable.
They're life-changing for sure.
Wow. I think that's what's so inspiring about the Dhammapada. It's this reminder that we all have the potential to cultivate these qualities, this inner peace, that freedom, no matter where we are on the journey.
Exactly. It's a journey we all can embark on. And, you know, like we've been saying, the Dhammapada, it gives you that map, it gives you the guidepost, but the journey is uniquely yours.
I love that. It's been so fun to kind of dive into this with you today.
Yeah, it's been great.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface of the Dhammapada.
Yeah.
But I'm walking away with a lot to think about, that's for sure.
Me too. And it really speaks to, I think, the timelessness of these teachings, you know, that they still resonate so deeply after all this time.
Right. And for folks who are listening, if you're intrigued, if this has sparked your curiosity, the best thing you can do is really dive in yourself.
Absolutely. Get your hands on a copy.
Read it slowly, contemplate the verses, see what speaks to you. Maybe even choose one verse
Ooh, I like that.
that really resonates.
Yeah.
And see if you can embody that message throughout the week.
Yeah. That's a great practice.
Yeah. And as you're going on your own deep dive, remember that image of the self-tamed.
Yeah.
What would it look like for you to cultivate that kind of inner mastery in your own life?
Ooh, that's a good one to sit with.
That is a good one to sit with. And on that note, we'll leave you with that thought. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep diving deep.